Okay. Our second reader tonight is Molly Spencer. Molly is a poet, critic, and editor. Her debut collection, If the House, published in 2019 by University of Wisconsin Press, won the Brittingham Prize, judged by Carl Phillips. Her second collection, Hinge, won the Crab Orchard Open Competition, judged by Allison Joseph. It was published by Southern University Press in 2020. Molly's poetry has appeared in many publications, including Blackbird, Field, New England Review, Plowshares, and Prairie Schooner. Her critical writing has appeared in the Colorado Review, Georgia Review, Kenyon Review, the Writer's Chronicle, and the Rumpus, where she is a senior poetry editor. She also has a blog called The Stanza, a little room for poetry and the writing life. Molly has a varied educational background, including a BA in economics from Notre Dame, an MPA from Columbia's School of International and Public Affairs, and an MFA in poetry from the Rainier Writing Workshop. She's taught writing to students of all ages and currently teaches writing at University of Michigan's Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy. If you'd like to know more about Molly, her work and her writing process, I would recommend that you check out her 1220 interview with Martha Stewart in A2 Pulp, or her 1120 interview with Leslie Lindsay online at Always with a Book. We're truly in for a feast of language. Please welcome Molly Spencer.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'll just say too that I am a native Michigander. I grew up in West Michigan in Rockford, which is a little town north of Grand Rapids. I'm the daughter of 2 public school educators, and I have a couple brothers. And I lived away for most of my adult life, starting when I went away to college, but recently have moved back to Michigan. And I'm just so thankful and happy to be here among you. When I was first trying to get serious about writing poetry, I lived in St. Paul, Minnesota, and it was community poetry circles like this that really gave me a home and where I learned so much. And I really value the ways that poetry creates community and moves through communities. And so I'm really, really happy to be here. I moved here not very long before the pandemic, and it's been a little bit hard to get to know all the poets in Southeast Lower Michigan because of the pandemic. So it's just great to be here. I'm very grateful to David and Ed and Lisa for putting this together and inviting me to be a part of it. I thought I'd read from a few different pockets of my work tonight. And I'm first going to just get my stopwatch going so I can keep an eye on the time. I'm going to read first from Hinge, which was my second collection published, although it was the first one I wrote. And so these poems are from a time in my life when I was a mother of very young children. And Hinge primarily engages, this is the cover, primarily engages with the experience, the kind of emotional and I guess physical geography of serious illness. I was quite seriously ill, but undiagnosed when my kids were little. I eventually got a diagnosis of lupus. But this was my book that I cut my teeth on as a poet. This is the book that taught me how to write poems and how to put them together in a collection. So I wanted to start with it. And I'm going to start with a poem called After Reading the Story of Assumption Chapel in Cold Spring, Minnesota, which is a chapel that the people of Cold Spring built during the plague of locusts that happened. There were a few of them in the late 1800s. The doctor says your disease is still ripening. Ripening, you ask, and feel your teeth slice late plums through to stone. You think of seeds swollen into fat hearts of summered flesh, then storms of locusts shearing bare the fields. He says it may be years, and you watch linens vanish like dreams swallowed off clotheslines. You see a boy. He is small. He gathers locusts like stones that might save him on a roofless night in the woods. 10 cents a bushel, he'll have new boots for winter. The doctor says this is the nature of your disease, long growing season beset by plague and fire, good years, and lean. You sigh against the hollow cheeks of the farm wives. Their husbands are building a chapel to the Virgin, a hillside plea, small cape of prayer. You say, please, I have built a roof over my children's heads. It is close to collapse. You say it, ripening. Imagine a woman carved in stone above a doorway, rising skyward, her hands held out to the locusts at her feet, as if to say, yes, even this. And that description of the stone carving is actually the architrave above the doorway of this chapel in Cold Spring, Minnesota. So it's a carving of the Blessed Virgin Mary and locusts at her feet. So one of the things that was difficult for me in writing about illness was wanting it to be more than just about me and finding the language for it. And so what I did in order to write some of these poems was I turned to our oldest stories, Greek myth and fairy tales, and reimagined them through the lens of the illness I was experiencing. The poem I'm going to read next borrows from the Greek myth of Persephone and Demeter. And it was my effort to, I think, reckon with how to kind of respond to my family's concerns. My parents were very worried about me, of course, my brothers. It was an effort, I think, to calm them and try to explain what I was going through, which I could not do in regular language, but I somehow could do in poetry. So this is Persephone, since she kept asking, and it's addressed to Demeter, Persephone's mother. Persephone, since she kept asking, I gave her an answer. Chose a window with a view of rough country, said oak, said aster, piled up lies in her warm brown eyes. What can she know of the word crawl space, of the choiring black birds that nest in my hair? Look out the window, Mom. The bright moss is my sash as it tore, the bone white road remnant press of my spine. The far smoke is my father's slight amendment. Blue mountain, torn rind of my heart, and there in the middle distance, near the house that kneels praying on the hillside, he is the black horse barely rendered. I am the open door. I'm going to read next some selections from one of the longer poems in the book. Of course, as a poet, I'm very interested in language. And one of the things that I think actually saved me in this time of serious illness was that I was able to observe it as a poet and be very interested in the language used in medical settings and in the ways that people who loved me spoke about me. And it was also at the time when my children were coming into language, were learning to talk. And so this poem tries to capture, I think, some of those interests of navigating both the physical and the emotional geographies of illness, but also the language of illness. So this is from a longer poem called Patient Years, and I'm just going to read a few selections from it. Now you are a ladder of bones and blanks on a lit screen. Woman of marble, architecture, skinned thing, and those eyes, bare rooms where the blue was. Now you are a frame scraped down to its parts, true ribs and faults, ischium, ulna, all 27 bones of the hands. The doctor says, do you drop things? Yes, hopefully not the baby. Now the baby is all hill and pearl, curve and petal. When she's tired, she crawls away from you, holds up her arms to the walls. Now you are in a room where the story ends the same every time. Everyone empty-handed. Bedtime, the boys ask, can we catch it? Does it ever go away? In the doorway of your answer is a snuffed out candle, a way of saying no that hangs in the air. You've looked inside the dim house of your body for years, at the blurred threshold between mother and creature, where at night you crouch and try to sleep. You've dreamed it, ditching your car by the river, tucking the plates in your purse, then a hammer of thought, the children. There are 3 now, and you ebbing. You've looked long at the river's churn and hunger, at your 2 beggars' arms. You've seen the choice you'd make. Take the one whose memory goes back longest. Take him by the scruff of the neck. On the neat branches of the decision tree, you are vague constellation of symptoms. The doctor says, we may never know. There is enough night sky in his words for you to fall away in. Nebular, Magellanic, aftermath of chance conflagration and midwife to new stars. You've seen the photos, ghost clouds, smoky pillars rising up like hands, hooked fingers, light year after light year. The doctor says, does it hurt when I do this? Hands that feed the edgeless night with small spoons of light as they themselves are consumed. Night has finished unraveling get up. The dull knife of the day presses through you. The thread you strung from your bed to the kitchen is frayed by years of use. No God is coming for you, no raft sent out in the flood. They are still here, the pain, the slow leak, the children's voices pinging down the hall. Someone says visitor, someone says faults. A children's game you almost remember. Someone says safe, someone says chimney. They laugh, they clap their hands. They don't know yet that safe is the shell of an egg. They're forgetting. On the first page of every story with a chimney is a pile of dry limbs waiting to burn. In this family of illness, the doctor says, the body attacks itself. Now, let me take a look at your hands. Studies show people get used to living in pain, the doctor says. He is smiling. Then all the midnights well up from the cellar of you, half dreams of rock and river, the sift of everything unmoored. To become a story of erosion, you must first live in all the hollow cities of the bones. To become echo, you must learn a forced flight. A canyon grows deep and marked through patient years of dragging away, all the stacked palimpsests of lives unearthed, a feather, a stitch of bone, some useful tool maybe, this chipped edge of stone. Deeper down, the carvings, all the colors of birth and fire, the caves, the caverns, the intricate hidden rooms. Now just read one more from Hinge, another kind of myth-based poem, which again, I think was my effort at reckoning with putting my family at ease about what had become my life. My mom still says, used to say a lot, but still says, I wish I could take this away from you. I wish you didn't have to live with this, which as a mother myself, I completely understand. But I have also tried to explain to her anyway, that this is my life, and it's like my life. So it's not something that I mean, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but it's also not something that I would necessarily wish away. So this is Novembering. How can I explain? I feel him remembering me. His songs of lost seasons lace through my ribs, and in my veins, dreams of that first winter thaw and flow. Even as I gather late apples, dry leaves stutter in the wind like his regrets. The thieving, the blindfold, the groundward ride. Who would believe that by the time of rain and runoff, he'd become almost tender, wading my homesick waters, culling smooth stones to stack on our table, pulling out my chair. Mom, he built a house for me, and the rooms, though dark, are budding. The windows gleam like scars of my own skin. Mom, it's years now, and my hand knows the curve of his back. My bones give way to the opening door of his voice saying winter. These waning days are the pitch of his roof, gathering in my weak protests, becoming wind and wingspan of the only life I know. I thought I'd read next just a few poems from If the House, which was the first book that I had published, but the second book I wrote. That actually happens a lot more often than I realized until I started talking to other poets about it. I'm going to read a few elegies from this book. And they are all kind of steeped in landscape settings. Growing up in West Michigan, I lived on the edge of this meadow and a deep woods, a big forest. And I lived in that meadow and in those forests growing up. And so landscape became a very formative force in my life and in my poetry as well. So this is called Elegy with Edge Effects. Edge effects are it's a term that biologists use to describe the changes that happen in wildlife communities at the edge of two habitats. So this is Elegy with Edge Effects. The sky is stone and the rain, and yes, I am blown here. Stand of birch strung alongside the meadow, sodden, not knowing what to do with their hands in this weather. I am here only to ask, what edge of the woods did you ever mean to me? There was something about cool silk, sand on the bare heel. There was something about the threshed light through branches when the rain stopped and the sun slid through, about more than one world in the world. I keep trying to tell about this and the call of the bird more often seen than heard. That bird, by the way, is the wood thrush. A bird you're more likely to see than hear its song. The next elegy, so I lived in California for several years as I made my journeys through my adult life. And my brother and his family lived there as well. And I had lived in all winter climates until then, and then moved to California where they have this phrase that they use. It's called going up to the snow, which means going up into the Sierra Nevada mountains and, probably skiing and going snowboarding. But the idea of snow being something that you could kind of go up to and then leave behind was very novel to me when we first moved there. So this poem began when I was home for a Christmas visit. My brother and his family had already gone back to California. I was with my kids at my parents up north, and we got some snow, which was very exciting to my California kids. And this one's called Elegy, beginning with a text from my brother. And that text said, "How was the snow?" As if the snow were a province I'd visited, not a season come down upon me. as if he'd never stood on the ridge and watched the whole cloth of it blow in over the lake, blank and bridal. Any mark I'd made on the earth, it annulled. The dropped map, the poor footprints of children, the felts I pulled from their boots, hoping they'd dry by morning. The snow was a field I woke in. Here are the drifts of my hands for proof. Here's my heart gone to windbreak. Brother, I am tired of living bone-bound and uphill, of rolling through stops to keep from getting stuck. The snow was irrevocable, songless, a relic, the ruins of a wood. I made my way home by ditch and by deadfall. All night laid awake in the storm, listening for the scrape of the plow gone by, waiting for the blade and my body to change the snow's tense from falling and falling to fell. I'm going to read one last little elegy here, and then I promise to read something that's a little more lighthearted, which, if you can't tell by now, is not my bent as a poet. This is called As If Life Can Go On As It Has. The earth has all these endings. The sparrows drop, the lilies lie down in a ditch. In the daylight, a 2-lane highway confirms all its nouns, dregs of an orchard, barn dissolving, tract homes, conjured from forsaken fields. I am in a kitchen's heavy afternoon light. As if life can go on as it has, I sing, I stir a pungent sauce, the exact shade of love or fear. The children pepper me with whys and hows. The stove fan swallows what rises. Okay, I'm gonna finish with a poem about my good friend and neighbor, Frank, in Mountain View, California, where I lived before I moved back. Frank took on the project of tearing out his lawn one year. And in California, it's actually not all that uncommon to have a dirt yard, but to watch him tearing out his lawn really spawned an existential crisis for me. So I wrote this poem, which you will notice borrows from Shakespeare. It's called Frank Next Door. The dishes are done, the counter wiped, the children are all at school. The window is open to a mild morning breeze, construction noise, the many wars and storms that pound the earth. But what I need to know, Frank Next Door, is why have you torn out your lawn? Also, am I my neighbor's keeper? And why do we now say 3 times instead of thrice, as in thrice you have bent your 89 years, you're stooped back over the same tired patch of grass between our houses. 3 times you have pulled it out by hand. Frank, I'm up early. I know it's you I hear at 6 a.m. with the scritch of your rake and the occasional hollow thunk of one of my boys' balls that you've thrown back over to our side of the fence. Thank you, Frank. But can I ask, why did you not stop with the grass? Why have you tipped and unpotted all your leggy geraniums, which I had come to admire for their infrequent orange blooms? Was it you who came upon Ophelia sewing, fierce and uncertain, your shirt unbuttoned, hair raised like a sail from sleep or madness? And Frank, how is Barbara? It's been months since I've seen her on your porch in her blue house dress. Do you know, Frank, how hard it is to explain the concept of house dress to today's kids? I confess, I believed myself up to the task. I of sweep and mop, I of apron, of the homemade cupcakes I brought to my daughter's class, about which a little girl asked, can't you afford real cupcakes? Of house dress, I explained, a simple garment, a row of buttons, often faded, never mind. But Frank, about your camellia, that too? Despite its great red eyes that open twice a year, Frank, the glossy leaves, the smooth layered buds before they flower, how fastened they are, how pleasing in their closeness. And what means this, my neighbor, that you have left the bindweed climbing over our shared fence? That squatter, that stowaway creeper has staked its claim as the worst weed in California. Frank, what I'm asking is, are you shuffling off your mortal coil? Should I start bringing casseroles? Is it so long a life? Did you know it's also called creeping Jenny, bellbind, sheepbind, and cornbind? Don't you love such words? Frank next door, is it wrong for me to find the bindweed oddly beautiful? Its scrawny persistence, all its trailing arms and legs, the weak white faces of its blooms as they open to show a curved swirl of blood at their throats. Thank you.